Hello, I'm Jeremy, and I'm here to talk about how learning to play a banjo later in my life actually made me a better developer and a better learner. So hopefully that sounds not too bad. I am still learning. I'm not an expert, and that's actually kind of part of the point. So basically, I kind of learned these three big things that became useful to me as a developer that had directly to do with the banjo. And that is, first of all, learning about the growth mindset, which actually removed a lot of limits for me. Learning that asking experts actually is really useful and you can learn a lot of things. And then also that you don't have to be an expert to show what you already have learned, as you've seen right here. So that's really what I'm here to talk about today. Kind of a big changing point in my life was learning about the growth mindset. And this was something that I learned through Linda Rising. So she did a keynote at an Agile conference and I saw a recording of it. I wish the recording was still online because it was pretty awesome. And this is where I learned the concept of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset basically says you have an aptitude for certain things. So, maybe I'm good in math. I'm not so good in history. And you know what? Driving, probably down here. So there's kind of this fixed capacity for what we can do. And we can live up to that or not. So it's kind of a potential, but you can't really go beyond that. Now, the growth mindset says that we can learn and grow with whatever we put our minds and our efforts into. And that was just a huge concept for me because, for example, when I was growing up, I thought of myself as not a musical person. And the reason for that is because music did not come easily to me. I saw my older brother, music came very easily to him. And so I just kind of thought, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't my thing. You know what? Math, science, I'm pretty good at that. And hey, computers are pretty cool too. So the idea is that I had placed this limit on what I was allowed to learn based on this idea of the fixed mindset, meaning, you know what, that's something I'm not very good at. And so once I started learning about this growth mindset and the idea of, when you practice, you can get better. And that doesn't mean that all of us can be, brilliant at everything we do. But what it does mean is there's constant improvement. There isn't like a top limit to how good we can do. We can keep getting better. And so basically, what happened is I started looking at my life and re examining things because in the development world, at this point in time, when I learned about this concept, I was, mid-career as a developer. I had been teaching people how to program at this point, right? So I'd been doing speaking and blog articles and videos and things like that. So I was thinking, you know what? I kind of treat the people I'm teaching with this growth mindset because my attitude towards the people I'm teaching is, hey, you can learn this. There's some hurdles, and I'll help you get over some of the hurdles I got over, but this is something you can do. And not really realizing that I had placed limits on myself, saying, you know what, technology is one of those things I can do. Music is one of those things I can't do. And again, kind of thinking about my history, and I looked at something in my past that kind of surprised me. And for those of you who aren't old like me, you're not going to know what this is. So this is a Guitar Hero controller. And it's got a cord. This plugs into a PlayStation 2. So that kind of tells you how old it is. Um, and the reason I have that is because a friend showed me Guitar Hero, and I'm like, that looks like a pretty fun game. And but at the time, I didn't have a PlayStation, so I actually went out. I bought the PS2. I bought the Guitar Hero kit game with the guitar, and I'm like, okay, this will be fun. And I plugged it in, put it on the easy level, and did terrible, like absolutely terrible. After about 5 minutes, I basically just kind of threw down the guitar. I'm like, this is the stupidest game ever. But for whatever reason, um, I went back to it. Probably because I didn't have much of a life at the time. And so I went and I played it. And what I found is that the more I did it, the better I get. And I put way too many hours into that. But that's back when I was single and didn't have too many responsibilities. So it was fun. It was entertaining. And what I found is that when the new games would come out, I couldn't even play on the easy levels anymore because they went too slow. I was used to playing on the hard and expert levels. And so when a new version of the game would come out, I went straight to that. And so I was thinking about that when I learned about the growth mindset. And it's like, well, yeah, Guitar Hero isn't something very useful for real life, but it did prove to me that even if there was something that I didn't think I could do, I thought was stupid, and there's no way I can ever do this. Um, I did it. And so that was an example from my life where I said, you know what, let's go ahead and change some things. So I went back to this idea of I'm not a musical person. And when I was small, probably 7 or 8 years old, I took piano lessons, but I didn't really put time into it. I didn't really enjoy it because I didn't put time into it and I never really improved. So, again, I had this block that I'm not a musical person. And so I happened to be watching the original Muppet movie one day, and Kermit the Frog plays Rainbow Connection at the beginning with a banjo. And what I found out is that Amazon sells banjos. In fact, there's the one that I bought off Amazon right back there on my wall. And I just kind of took it as a challenge to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this. And I didn't spend a lot of money on it because I didn't, first of all, I have like enormously large hands. So I wasn't sure if I'd be able to physically do it very well. So I got this banjo and then I got a book, which is this one, Bluegrass Banjo for the Complete Ignoramus, which was beautiful for me. And the great thing about starting with this book that I kind of picked up accidentally is that it made me feel like I was making progress. So it started out very simple with just here, just pick out the melody notes and let's go ahead and add some more to it. So, something like this. Let's pick out some melody notes. And then, hey, let's add a pinch. And hey, how about a drone note? And hey, why don't we just make it a two-finger roll? And so because I had, picked up this book that made me feel like I was making progress, I kept at it. Now, I've had this banjo for about 5 years now. I'm kind of not as good as a 5-year player should be, and that's because it's been on my shelf quite a bit. I relocated across country and got married, and a bunch of other things happened in my life, so it kind of went on the shelf for a while. And I've been picking it up from time to time, and I kind of picked it up recently and just said, you know what, let's go ahead and do this. Now, I am self-taught, but I don't like using the word self-taught because I'm actually not teaching myself. I'm learning from people like Wayne Erbson, right? So it was the same thing. I don't have I kind of have some now, but when I started programming, I didn't have formal training. But that doesn't mean I was self-taught. It's not like I sat down at a computer and figured it all out. No, I was learning from books. I was learning from different resources. So I was learning from other people, and it was really cool. And so just this idea of I can learn whatever I put my mind to is just this brilliant concept. And I wish like everybody understood this. Um, and just because we put limits on ourselves and we put limits on the people that we know. And kind of as an example, a couple weeks ago, I was trying to learn a forward roll, which is kind of a basic roll. And my fingers kept getting tangled up when I was learning this. And I was thinking to myself, I'm never going to be able to do this. This is just like every time I try to hit my thumb and index finger and alternate back and forth, it's just not working for me. But I practiced and I can actually do it without tripping myself up. Now, I'm not going to say this is brilliant, but here's a little bit more banjo. And it's not perfect, and that's okay. So, again, that growth mindset, that was a huge change for me as far as putting my mind to it. And same thing in the development world. I know that anything I sit down to learn, I know I can do it. And that's a really awesome feeling to have. So, kind of where I go from here is kind of the advantages I've learned by talking to experts. um, Unfortunately, in the development world, I don't know why our culture is like this, but there's this fear of asking questions. There's this fear of showing weakness. If I don't show that I know everything, then the hyenas are going to pounce on me, and I'm going to lose my position and my status, and it'll be terrible. But what I found specifically with the banjo is I could tap into experts and learn new things. So, for example, when I first got that banjo back there, uh, having trouble pointing at it, but it's on the wall. You can see it back there. I wasn't sure if it was a good instrument to learn on because, again, it wasn't very expensive and it's not, a brilliant instrument, but and to me, when I played it, I was kind of like, well, I don't know if this sounds right. And the good news is I found out that someone in the developer community was a professional banjo player. So I went to see him at a code camp, Woody Zool. You might have heard of him from the mob programming world. Um, Woody is just such a nice guy. And what I found out was between the ages of 16 and 27, he was a professional banjo player. And so, I told him, "Hey, I got a banjo." And he's like, "Do you have it with you?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's in the car. Let me go get it." So I went and got it and handed it to him. And that's when I found out that there was nothing wrong with the banjo. The banjo sounded just fine. So the weirdness that I was hearing was my own playing. But while I was there, I kind of showed him a couple simple things that I had learned so far. And then he gave me some tips of, how to do some progressions on the banjo. And so just by that experience, again, I got confirmation that, hey, this is a good instrument to learn on and I can move forward with that. And, it happened to me again, probably about 3 months later. I was at a code camp in Salt Lake City, and I love code camps. I miss those. I hope that we'll be able to do them again someday. But when the developer community gets together and we get to share stuff with each other, I love that. And at lunchtime one day, I ran into this guy named John Dean. And I never met him before, but he saw that I had my banjo with me and he asked me to play, which is surprising. Nobody asked me to play on purpose. And what I found out was he was a professional guitar instructor. And so, what was good about that encounter is he was able to confirm that I was holding the instrument properly. I wasn't going to cause carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that with my playing. And then he gave me some tips of how to play with a metronome so that I could play faster if I wanted to play that bluegrass style. And again, if I was afraid to say, well, I can't ask the experts. I just have to kind of fumble along on my own. Then I'd be really lost. And then this happened in the development world actually about 2 weeks ago. I needed to do a website and I was trying to style it so it looked like a desktop application that I had. And I am not a CSS expert. I am very novice when it comes to CSS. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I understand how it works and the nesting and the things and the styles and so forth, the different properties you can have. but I wasn't sure how to do this particular layout. Is there a good way of doing this? And with my contacts in the development world, I also knew that it's really easy to do CSS and make a complete disaster of it. So again, I was with my growth mindset, I was kind of like, well, you know what? I can figure this out on my own. I know I can. But I put out a call on Twitter and said, hey, any of my CSS experts want to help me? And fortunately, Martine Dowden responded. And Martine is awesome. And we sat down, we pair programmed um, over Google Hangouts for about 35 minutes. And I learned everything that I needed to move forward and finish the project that I was working on. And there were some properties I didn't know anything about that she showed me. And I'm like, that's really cool. And I see Martine's in the chat. Hi, Martine. Um, she also has a CSS book that is coming out very, very soon. So Martine is amazing. Now, someone did respond to me on Twitter and they said, hey, Jeremy, you've got this. You can figure it out on your own. And again, can I? Yes, I can. But if I can tap into an expert in 35 minutes, I get the information that I need rather than me fumbling around with it probably for a half a day trying to figure it out. So, tapping into experts, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign that we want to learn more. Okay, so I've talked about the growth mindset and that we can do whatever we put our time into. I've talked about asking the experts where we don't have to be afraid of showing weakness. Let's go ahead and ask for help. The third thing I want to talk about is that you don't have to be an expert to show what you know. You don't have to be perfect. And hopefully you've seen that demonstrated today. An I'm not an expert banjo player, and I'm not a perfect banjo player. And the reason why this is important to me is because thinking back again on my career, I did have this desire to teach people development skills. And I worked in a corporate environment, and it was great because our our manager would send us to the big conferences and I would learn all kinds of things at the big conferences. And I would think, you know what, it would be kind of cool to be up on stage and spread your knowledge to other people. But I was also thinking, you know what? Who cares about what I know? Right? I'm definitely not an expert in any of this stuff. I'm not one of those trailblazers that picks up a bleeding technology and starts fiddling with it. I kind of wait for people to figure out how it works and then I go in and make stuff for my users, right? I concentrate on my users. So I'm not doing anything like new and exciting. And so I'm thinking, who cares, right? But then I was listening to the .NET Rocks podcast one day, and they had a panel discussion where they talked about, specifically in the .NET world, .NET came out in 2001, which seems like a really long time ago now. And at the beginning, everybody was talking about those introductory topics, how the garbage collector works and variables and the type system and everything. But then, 5 years on, 6 years on, nobody's talking about those introductory topics anymore. They're talking about what's new and shiny. And they said, hey, we need people to talk about this introductory stuff. And I'm like, I can do that. And so what I did was about 2 weeks later, a local code camp sent out their call for papers. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to submit presentations and I'm going to go speak at my local code camp. And I'm not an expert. And that's okay. Because basically, what I'm doing is I'm showing people what I've learned. And the reason that's important is because there's people on the path behind me. So you don't have to be an expert to help someone else. What you can do is say, hey, you know what? I really struggled with this. Here's how I got around it. Here's what I did. And then there's someone out there who will say, this is exactly what I needed. So there's a lot of content out there. Don't be afraid to add your own. Just as an example, I was, several years ago, I was exploring in the F sharp world. And so I decided to do the Euler problems because they were kind of a good functional style program problems that I could solve in F sharp. And I ended up writing a blog series on the first 10 Euler problems. And I knew there were solutions out there. You just go Google Euler and F sharp or Euler in any language, and you'll find a whole bunch of them. And for those of you who don't know about the Euler problems, it's EULER. And it's a set of, kind of programming challenges, I guess you'd call them. And there's tons of solutions out there. So why do mine matter? Well, it was me exploring the F sharp type systems and the way that the functions fit together and how streams work and things like that. So I blogged about that. And probably about 6 months after that, I was at an event and someone came up to me and said, "Hey, Jeremy, I was reading the articles that you wrote about the Euler problems. Are you going to do any more?" And it was a great feeling to know that, hey, I helped someone else, in that area that I thought I really didn't have anything new to add. There it is, and of course, um, I started speaking in January 2010. I was hooked immediately, and I've done 350 talks since then. So I just love doing it. And that's because when I'm there, I love watching the light bulbs go on in the audience. And it's like, okay, this was something that was hard for me to learn. I just helped that person get over it so they don't have to go through the same struggle I did. And that's a really good feeling for me. And so that's basically how I spent my career. When it comes to playing banjo, like I said, I took piano lessons when I was a small child. And in that environment, I would not play unless I knew the piece perfectly. There was no room to show weakness, I guess you'd say. And so instead, what I've done specifically with the banjo is I show people what I've learned. I'm not perfect, and that's okay, because what I'm doing is I'm showing what I have learned. And what I'm showing is, what? Whatever you pick up, you're not instantly awesome at it. And that's perfectly okay. Let me do one more little short thing, and this is going to be a little painful because this is this is what I'm learning right now. Okay. Okay. Okay, that was a little more terrible than usual, but that's okay. So, just to kind of wrap things up, what makes us better as a banjo player or as a developer? First of all, a growth mindset. And when we have that, we can explore, we can learn, and we can practice. And when we practice, we get better. We don't have predefined limits on what we can do. Second, learn from the experts. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not showing weakness, it's showing that you're interested in learning. And third, show what you've learned. You don't have to be an expert to help someone else. So that's how a banjo made me a better developer. And hopefully, my experiences will encourage you to keep growing and learning something new. Thank you.